All right, well, welcome everyone to our Why Taking a Broader Look at Your Security Can Better Protect Your Team webinar, hosted by Action Network and Safety Sync Group. My name is Mariah Brown. I'm the Strategic Partnerships Manager here at Action Network. I'm joined by some amazing panelists who I'll allow to introduce themselves to tell you a little bit about them and why we're here today. But if you're not familiar with Action Network, we are the progressive tool powering organizations to reach their constituents through digital tools. And we are doing a series with our partners that we think will be resources to the community. Which is why we're here today to talk about your organization's security. I will kick it over to Matt Hansen to get us started. Um, yeah, Matt, take it away.
Thank you so much, Mariah, and thanks for the opportunity. And thank you to all of you for taking time out of your day to join us. We really appreciate it. We'll be respectful of your time. We'll try and give you a lot of hopefully useful, actionable information, and definitely save a portion of today's session for questions, since I know this is a topic that affects us all. Quick introductions on my end. Matt Hansen, I head up client relations for Safety Sync Group. We're a risk mitigation firm that works with clients of all types, but particularly focused around mission-aligned organizations, as I know many of you fit that bill. And Matt, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, my name is Matt Mitchell. I'm the CEO of Safety Sync Group. My expertise is in counter surveillance, and I'm one of the best computer hackers in the world. But, like we hope to really impart on you in this how safety and security could not be scary. It could be something that we can get in front of. And like Matt said, Safety Sync Group is a risk mitigation firm that shares your values.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so without further ado, let's dive in. As Mariah said, today's topic, we're going to be talking about taking a different perspective on security than maybe you have in the past. And when we talk about security, it can mean so many different things to so many different organizations. We're going to be talking about sort of 5 areas that we consider to be key to your organization's security. We'll talk more about those in a minute. And how you can look at all 5 of those to give yourself kind of the broadest possible view of where your organization stands vis-a-vis the security of your folks on your team, the work that you do, the information that you have, and the communities that you serve. So that's really the purpose of today's talk. In terms of what we're going to be covering, these are kind of the key points that we want to hit on. But like I said, we're going to leave plenty of time at the end for questions. So if you have safety and security related questions, whether that's trends that you're concerned about or that you're seeing in your space, questions that might be more specific to your organization, we'll have opportunity to answer those for you as well. We really want to be a resource for you as best we can. But in terms of what we're going to cover today, I want to talk about a little bit about the distinction between what many organizations do when it comes to security, which is kind of a narrow view, and this idea of a broader vision or a broader look at security and how that can matter for your organization. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that. We're going to talk about sort of the 5 key areas, as I mentioned, that we consider to be key to your organization's security and how you can measure those areas, how you can improve in those areas, and how all those areas fit together. Matt's going to walk us through an example anonymized case study of a past client that we've worked with to give you an idea of what this all looks like in the real world in practice. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to take some questions and definitely want to get some answers for you as part of today's session. So let's just start at a high level. I know that we're talking to a lot of different organizations today. And I also know that each of you probably interfaces with safety and security in a different way. Some of you may be at the executive level and you don't necessarily have security as part of your job title, but it's key and important to everything that you do. Some of you may be managing safety and security and owning that portfolio for your organization. And some of you may be working more in like the operations or the HR side that touches on security as well. So we understand that everybody has a different relationship to the idea of security here, but we've all experienced when something goes wrong, right? We've all experienced when something bad happens to ourselves or to our team. And when that happens, it's human nature to drill down in on the symptom, right? What was the problem? And when we do that, we're taking a relatively narrow view, and we're going to talk about that in more detail. But to help illustrate this, let's use an example. So most of us are familiar with the idea of phishing, right? We've received a phishing email before, maybe trying to trick us into disclosing some information. So let's say, just for argument's sake, that a member of your team has received an email from a bad actor who's posing as one of their colleagues. And that bad actor has asked them to divulge some sensitive information, whether it's financial information about the organization, or maybe it's travel plans for an upcoming conference or an executive travel. And unfortunately, your colleague has divulged that information. They've made a mistake, and it happens to us all. So now we have a phishing attempt that was successful. And so it's human nature to say, we're going to put 100% of our security resources into making our email more secure. That's going to be our mission, and that's going to be our overriding security goal. And that's what we're going to focus on for the rest of the year. And again, that is what we would call a narrow vision of security. It's reactive and it's completely understandable, and it's solving a problem, right? By focusing exclusively on the symptom or the issue at hand, we might actually be mistakenly viewing one symptom as the whole picture. And so we're going to talk today about how we can take that one symptom and we can actually use it to take a broader view of our organization's security. So we're not going to ignore the phishing attempt. We're not going to sweep it under the rug. We're going to deal with it, but we're going to use it as a catalyst to actually look more broadly at our organization's security as a whole. And I think if that's a lesson that we can help impart to you as part of the work that we do, then I think we'll hopefully give you some resources that you can come away with and really feel empowered. So let's go back to the phishing example. Instead of seeing the phishing attempt as an isolated problem that has to be fixed at all costs, how can we use that to take this broader look at where our organization stands vis-a-vis security? So diving in a little bit deeper here, phishing can be a sign, and again, we're just going to use the phishing example for today's purposes, but this could be any security-related incident, cybersecurity, physical security, a break-in at the office, whatever it might be. Phishing can be a sign to take a look at our cybersecurity priorities. And what we're going to want to do here is we're going to want to break down our priorities into stages. We're going to look at a short-term, immediate priority. We're going to look at a medium-term priority, and then we're going to look at a longer-term priority. Now, most organizations, when they're dealing with an incident, only are looking at the short term. They're just looking at the immediate need. They're saying, my goodness, we've had an issue. We've had one of our colleagues divulge some information that they shouldn't have. We're going to double down on getting our email locked down, and then we're going to move on to other things. Because we're busy, we have a lot going on, we don't have time to deal with anything else. We're just going to put a Band-Aid on the issue and we're going to move forward. And our argument is, rather than putting that Band-Aid on and then moving on, why don't you use an incident or a concern or a pain point actually as a catalyst to have a bigger conversation about security? So here's an example of how we could do that. Clearly, in the aftermath of a phishing attack, we want to take immediate steps to identify and avoid any future phishing attempts, right? That's going to be our number one priority. Then we want to think about, well, what can we do as a medium-term priority to continue to further strengthen our organization beyond those immediate steps? So in this case, we obviously also have an issue where people don't know within the organization where and when and how to report suspicious activity. Because there's a chance that if they had known about that, about who to contact about a phishing attempt, maybe they wouldn't have fallen for the attempt in the first place. So that's a medium-term step that we want to take, is how do we improve reporting of suspicious activity? And then we think, okay, can we go one step further? Can we go even one step beyond that to help strengthen our organization? We know that, unfortunately, in this case, there was some sensitive information that was divulged. Well, that indicates that we also have an issue with the way we handle sensitive information. So you can see how we started off with something relatively small, a phishing attempt that was successful, and we ended up building an entire roadmap for a way to address security, cybersecurity at our organization. And that's really what we want to try to do here when we take this broader look at security. And so what started off at the immediate level as taking a bunch of technical steps, like, for example, filtering our emails, improving our spam detection, ensuring that we have phishing training, then becomes a process of building out even more resources for security. So we take care of that low-hanging technical fruit, and then we start thinking about, well, what can we do to go one step further? How can, for example, can we start to build a culture of security where people feel more comfortable talking about security issues? How do we ensure that people have a point of contact within the IT department? So if they see something suspicious, they know who to talk to about it. How can we ensure that we have an open door policy, for example, so that if someone has an issue, a technical concern, a security concern, they know that we're always, welcome to receiving alerts or updates from them. And then we go even one step further and we start thinking about, well, how do we change the way we handle sensitive information as an organization as a whole? Maybe we migrate off of email for certain conversations. Maybe we move to encrypted messaging for other conversations. Maybe we institute a data retention policy. Maybe we increase staff training. So these are all examples of ways that we've started off with something relatively narrow, like a phishing attempt, and we've broadened it out. And you can see on this chart here, we've actually turned one issue into a catalyst for talking about the organization's cybersecurity posture as a whole. And that's just an example, again, of how we can take this narrow view and we can change it to a broader view. And we can also do the same thing by looking at other areas of security within our organization. It's tempting when we have a security incident in one domain, like a cybersecurity incident, for example, a phishing attempt that was successful. We might be tempted to say, well, that's just a cybersecurity issue. We'll just fix that by looking at the cybersecurity side of the organization, without necessarily realizing that security is connected, right? What might begin as a cybersecurity issue could quickly migrate and become a physical security issue as well. So we're also advocating for you to use your time and your resources to look broadly, not just in one domain of security, but actually across your organization. So again, here's an example of how we could do this using phishing as an example. So obviously, our short-term goal here, we're going to increase awareness, identification, and avoidance of phishing attempts moving forward. That's our number one priority. But now we want to put our physical security hat on and say, well, okay, now that we know we've had a successful phishing attempt that did result in some leakage of data, what does this mean for our physical security as well? Well, for one, it might mean that we now have work devices that are potentially compromised. Potentially someone was able to access our work devices through that phishing attempt. And now we have staff who are bringing compromised work devices into the office or taking those home or connecting them to our network. Then that's a concern we have to manage on the physical side as well, is the actual physical work devices that we're using. And then we can go even one step further, just like we did on the cybersecurity side. We can go one level up the ladder and we can say, okay, so if we have an issue with our physical devices, potentially we also have an issue with our physical offices. If someone is able to get inside of our systems, maybe they're also able to override and get around our security measures at our actual physical office and gain entry to our office. So you can see how it ladders up from something that starts as a phishing attempt and then becomes all of a sudden an issue that we have to deal with on the physical security side as well. And so again, just like we did on the cybersecurity side, we want to try to use this as a catalyst to have a bigger conversation about some changes that we can make on the physical security side. So for example, we might want to take a look at our device policies. Do we have do people in our office bring their own devices? Do we have company-owned devices that we issue? How do we ensure those devices are secured? Are people taking devices on travel with them and bringing them back to the office? That's a question that we can address as part of this conversation. And then we can go, again, one level deeper and say, what about our actual security systems or access control at our offices? If someone was able to get inside our network, could they therefore then also get inside our offices? How can we take steps to ensure that we're tightening that security as well? So again, you can start to see how by taking this kind of bigger picture view, you're raising more questions, certainly, but you're also helping to address and mitigate more concerns than if you took a narrow approach and a narrow view. And then last example here, because again, we could spend an hour alone just on talking about this example, but last example being, again, let's say we've had this phishing incident. How does it affect the mental health and well-being of our staff, right? We oftentimes don't think of mental health as being a component of security, but it is. It plays an important role in the way we think about how we talk about security, how secure and safe we feel in the office. So we can use this phishing attack as an excuse to have a conversation about the team well-being as well. And again, we want to see if we can ladder up a bit here and take care of the immediate phishing incident while also thinking one step ahead. How do we, for example, encourage a culture where people feel more enabled to proactively report threats? How do we create a culture where people feel less anxiety around talking about security? All of these are questions that can come up when we take this bigger picture view of safety and security, rather than just narrowly looking at a single symptom or a single incident. So I know this was a lot to digest, but hopefully it gives you an idea of how you can take one single concern, point of stress, point of pain, and use it as an opportunity to broaden the conversation and say, what are we fundamentally not asking ourselves about security as an organization? And how can we use this as an opportunity to have that bigger conversation, which keeps us safe? So in summation here, you can see how we started off with just one incident, a phishing attack. And all of a sudden, we've come up with a variety of different proactive steps that we can take to improve our security beyond just an email security policy. We've talked about behavior change, for example, making sure that people feel like they can raise concerns, that they won't be blamed if something goes wrong, that they lower the anxiety level. We've talked about technical fixes, like how can we make sure that our email filtering is improved and that we're doing phishing training. We've talked about changes to our office environment. How can we make sure that access control is improved in our office? Our devices are more secure. And we've talked about team support. How can we build that culture of security and that open door policy? And all of that came out of a single incident or a single concern or a single pain point. And that's really what we mean when we talk about this broader look, right? It's taking that single thing and broadening it out so that we're looking at every facet of security within an organization. So I mentioned at the beginning that there are 5 key areas of security across your organization that we encourage you including as part of this viewpoint, right? And I want to take a minute and break down those 5 areas for you in a little more detail so that the next time you do face a security concern, an incident, a worrisome trend within your field, you can go back to this and you can say, well, how would this actually affect us in these 5 important areas? And you'll notice that some of these are, I think, the kind of obvious ones that you would pick when you think of security, and then others maybe you wouldn't necessarily have thought of as a aspect of security, but they're equally important. So first, of course, when we want to think about our organization's security or the security of our team, is our physical security. And the key question we want to ask here is, how do we protect our people, our places, and our property, and our data in many cases if it's on a physical device? Cybersecurity, of course, vital to all our organizations, increasingly so. And the question we want to ask ourselves there is, how do we protect our systems, our data, and our internal processes? We also want to think about the more intangible aspects of security here as well. For example, crisis communications. We may not always think of this as a security measure, but in the event of an incident or a crisis, we want to have a communications plan in place. So the question we want to ask ourselves there is, how do we protect our reputation and our ability to achieve our mission, right? And that comes out of, making sure that we have a communications plan in place for when something like, for example, a phishing attack occurs. Mental health is the 4th area that we would encourage you to consider as part of this security framework. And the question there is, how do we protect the well-being of our staff and the community that we serve, right? And we touched on this a little bit earlier. If your team feel a great sense of anxiety or concern or stress about talking about security, they don't feel comfortable admitting when something went wrong, it's not going to be a very secure organization, right? So we want to prioritize mental health as something important. We're all carrying a lot in the work that we do, and so there's many resources as we can offer to folks, the better. And then lastly, legal. And this is, an obvious one for many organizations, but sometimes we don't always think of legal in the context of security. And really what we're asking ourselves here is, how do we protect our work from legal challenges? And so putting all 5 of those areas together really gives us a pretty comprehensive picture of your organization's security. And we would really encourage you to do something similar to the exercise that we just went through, where you think, okay, let's start with an incident or a point of concern or a worrisome trend, and let's game out what this would look like on the big picture for the 5 key areas that we believe make up an organization's security. So I want to take a minute and just talk through some examples of what falls under each of these domains, because I think it's important, especially if you're thinking about this for the first time, just to get a little bit of context about what each of these buckets contain. So on the physical security side, this can encompass everything from policies and plans that govern your offices, that govern your responses to a physical security incident. Um, Incident response plans obviously are key. If something was to happen to one of your team members, if something was to happen to at one of your events, how would you respond? Event security, office security, anytime you have members of your team gathering together in one place, we want to make sure we have a framework for keeping them safe. Executive protection is another area that falls under physical security. So how do you keep your top leadership safe? Do they need, for example, a dedicated security professional to accompany them if they are at a public event or if they're public speaking? And of course, travel security. Big important topic for any of us whose work takes us outside of our home region or the place that we normally work. On the cybersecurity side, again, we're also going to be touching on things like cybersecurity policies and plans. Do we have the infrastructure in place so that we know how to respond when something bad happens? But we also want to be looking additionally at topics like email security, which we talked about with phishing, device security. Are we responsible for bringing our own devices? If so, how are they set up? How are they monitored? Ransomware is a concern that affects many organizations. And of course, the security of your website, which is your public-facing face to the world. Crisis communications, what we're talking about here is what is our communication strategy, right? How do we think about talking about the work that we do? How do we think about how we would talk about something if, for example, we were the subject of negative media attention or criticism in the public eye? Have our staff undergone media training? Do our executives know how to conduct an interview with a journalist? Do we have a narrative for the type of work that our organization does? And do we know how to investigate something when something goes wrong? So all of that falls inside that kind of communications umbrella. And these are good questions to ask yourself as you go through these areas. For mental health, again, do we have a mental health policy? Do we have a wellness policy? Do we have resources that our staff can turn to when they're stressed, when they're dealing with long-term trauma? Do we have any kind of stress management resources in place for folks? Do we have coaching for our executives when they have to make difficult and tough decisions around people's safety? And have we done anything around team building, right? How do we make sure people feel like they're really part of that safe, secure culture? That all falls under mental health. And then lastly, of course, legal. Most of our organizations have a legal team, or at very least an attorney that we consult with. But some of the questions that we might not always think about would be, how would we respond to a subpoena? How do we handle data retention in a legally compliant way? And how would we handle certain information that would end up being discoverable in a court case? So these are all questions that we want to think about in advance of an incident occurring. The last part I just want to touch on here briefly, and then I'll turn it over to Matt to talk more about an actual case study and an example from real life of when we put this broad look at security into place, is what are some questions that you can ask to help begin this conversation? Because what I just talked through here, I think is hopefully helpful on a big picture level, right? It hopefully is helpful to explain our philosophy and our approach and why we think this matters, but ultimately you need to be able to implement this in your own organization. And so there's 5 questions that we put together here that we would really encourage you going through when you're facing particular security concerns. So if you remember back to the phishing example and how we took that one incident and we used that as a catalyst to ask a bunch of important questions, you can do the same thing here by asking yourself these 5 questions. So the first question is, how do my current security concerns, and that could be broad concerns, that could be a specific concern, that could be an incident you're facing, how do my current security concerns impact the 5 key areas of my organization's security posture? So going back to those 5 areas we just talked about, how does any security concerns that you're currently facing, how would they impact your physical security, your cybersecurity, your crisis communications posture, your team's mental health, your legal posture? Asking those questions is already a great start to implementing this kind of big picture look at security. Number 2, if we did experience an incident that affected just one of those areas, how would the other areas be impacted? And again, this gets back to a little bit about what we talked about in the beginning, where we had a phishing attempt and we might be tempted to say, well, that's just the cybersecurity executive's issue, right? But in fact, it actually, as we can see, impacts all different areas of the organization. So asking yourself that question can really help get ahead of some of these conversations. The third question, do we have a team member, a consultant, or a point of contact that is responsible for each of the 5 key areas? And this is often a tricky question for organizations because you might have someone in-house, an IT person, for example, or a communications team, but are they necessarily going to be the person you turn to in the event of an incident? Maybe, maybe not. So asking those questions ahead of time and really understanding who owns each of those 5 areas is going to be really important. Number 4, should we conduct a tabletop exercise to see how we would perform in each of the 5 areas? A tabletop exercise is a simulated exercise or a scenario in which you take a particular security risk and you ask yourself, how would we respond to this risk? So, for example, I might go to your organization and say, just to go back to our earlier example, you've had a phishing attempt that was successful, and now some of your sensitive information is circulating. What would you do? And you would go through each of the 5 areas and you would talk about how each of those 5 areas would respond. And doing something as simple as that can really help illustrate what is working and what is falling short. And in some cases, you may have even overlooked some vital steps that you can take to shore up one of those 5 key areas. And then the fifth question is, do we need outside support in any of the 5 key areas? And the chances are that the answer will probably be yes in at least one of the areas. And that's okay. That's the purpose of asking the question so that you can get ahead of these concerns and proactively address them. So if you come up and you realize, we have a fantastic IT team. They're doing the best they can with the resources they have, but they're not cybersecurity professionals and they need some support. That's exactly the answer you want to have, because that enables you to actually take steps to address the issue and become more secure. So that fifth question is also really critical. So I would strongly encourage all of you, if you're interested in implementing some of what we just discussed, to start with these 5 questions. Ask yourself these questions, measure your answers, figure out how you can improve, and come up with a game plan from there. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt now to talk through an example, a real life example of an anonymized case study of when we were able to implement something similar for a client.
Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Matt Hansen. Wonderful job. Just checking to make sure that you're still with us in the chat and on the stream. And maybe if you're watching this recorded, I can still hear you. Let's talk about an anonymous case study that shows this approach at work. Let's move on to the next one. First, you'll contact us, and we're Safety Sync because we will help you sync up around security. Imagine that there's an incident. In the scenario that I'm talking about, there was a person who reached out to us because they heard that their organization was in the news, and it seemed like it was like on social media, started on a couple of obvious places, like X, let's say. And they were like, let's just say they're seeing this information. I'm going to use a real case, but I'm going to anonymize it to, protect our client confidentiality as we work very discreetly. So somehow you'll find out a way to reach our team. That includes me, I'm the CEO, Matt, who you just heard from, our Director of Client Relations, our Chief of Staff, Danny Shaw, and our Chief Operating Officer, Kyle Reese. And what we'll do is we'll talk to you and get an idea of what package makes sense for you. As Matt already said, we work holistically across these 5 key areas, and we'll offer you a small, medium, large, so you understand that there's different areas, and we can right size the solution based on your budget and how much time and capacity your organization has. Once we get that solved, and in this particular case, with this incident, which seems like there's news that's reputational harm. There's people saying things that aren't true about me and my organization, seeing these messages on social media platform X. We're like, okay, now we could say that this looks like it's only digital or this looks like it's only reputational. But remember that we're looking at these 5 key areas. Let's move on to the next slide. The next step is for you to meet one of our care coordinators. And, with Safety Sync Group, what we do is we have everything in-house that you need. We're not just domain experts in one area. Like me, myself, I'm an expert in electronic stuff and hacking and, counter surveillance. But, at the same time, I don't have the arm strength necessary to be a close protection officer or bodyguard. And if you came to me just to help you with these things, I would fall short out of my domain expertise. But with Safety Sync Group, you get everything. And it starts with our care coordinators who usher you from expert to expert on your way to a safer outcome. Our care coordinators have backgrounds like this one might be a journalist, a security training background. And this other one might be a civil rights or racial justice expert who has uh, open source intelligence research capability and cybersecurity background, right? And they're there to meet you, understand who you are as a person, what your mission of your organization is, and how this particular symptom is impacting you directly. Let's move on to the next slide. Now, let's say with this one, we see these messages that are building up on social media, and there's a bunch of things on X. Our team might decide, like, let's get it to our physical security experts. We have a whole roster of physical security experts who have a background across all the different gambits and areas, from close protection to executive protection. But the key thing is, every single person that we work with is an expert. An expert means that this is not their first rodeo. They've been here before. They've seen these kind of things and they've had positive outcomes. And our vetting is probably one of the most key things is our talent pool are all people who are the absolute best in what they do in their industries. And our physical experts might take these messages, take a look at them, and then ascertain whether these are credible threats or whether this is something that you can be ignored. Oftentimes, we might think something is scary and therefore it might be more credible, but ignore something that's persistent, like someone who keeps messaging us every other week on a Tuesday saying, like, I'm going to get your group or I don't like what you're doing, right? Our physical security experts might be like, well, that person is putting in so much energy and time, and we're actually seeing a pattern where their messaging is getting like longer and longer, more words, more frequent, and that's something to look out for, right? And in this particular case, what they ascertained was that this is likely to spread outside of digital. There already seems to be what will turn into doxing, right? Where your personal identifiable information is leaked onto the public internet. And some of these threats seem like they're beyond just an idle troll writing a message on the internet. Let's move on to the next one. And that's when we bring in our cybersecurity experts. They're able to lock down all your accounts. And of course, they do the standard, strong passwords, two-factor verification on everything. But they also know that if you're using a SaaS platform like Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace, that there's several different layers to these services. And they make sure that you're paying for the level that gives you the protection of that service. You might think, oh, we're using Microsoft or we're using Google, we have the best security available, but that's often paid for only on the top tiers of the services. So they make sure that those things are set up. They also manage them for you, right? Behind any of these are a 747 airplane dashboard of switches and controls. And often the most highly secure and protective services and features are not turned on by default because they might impact email delivery or how the network works or who can share a file. And so actually they're often set to the most average. But if you're listening and subscribed and set up to this call, you probably are not considering yourself the most average, right? To take a step back, when we say that we work with mission-aligned organizations and we work with folks and we share your values, my personal perspective on it is many people are doing courageous and amazing things because they believe them to be the right thing to do. And if you're probably using Action Network to broadcast that, to, maybe using Action Builder to look at different ways to organize and build grassroots capacity. Maybe you're sending messaging out, maybe you're raising funds, but you're doing it because you believe this is correct and the right thing to do. But in my personal viewpoint, it's almost more like this game in the US that they have called tug of war, where there's a rope. And on one side of the rope, there's you pulling away with, doing your great things. But on the other side of the rope is an adversary. And how do these attacks happen anyway? Like, why is this happening? Well, it's because we don't exist in a vacuum. And every time we have a small win, someone experiences a small loss. And when we experience a big win, one of those headline grabbing wins, the rare ones, right? Well, someone experiences a huge loss, and it's on that day where you become really famous in their world. You're a thorn in their side, and they might be an individual who has low capability, resources, and funding, or they might be someone who actually can implement a whole game plan against you. And that was the case in this particular case study. Our cybersecurity team was able to look at the client's website, track that a lot of data was leaking on the website, including certain offices, individuals' first names, home addresses, etc., even though they weren't on the actual website itself. Sometimes they might be in registration material for the domain name. Sometimes they might be through a third party or service that doesn't encrypt or lock down their information. It means anyone with access to the website who has the right skill set can find that information. We're able to lock that down. So we're able to lock down the Microsoft, the Google, and the website. But we're also able to look into monitoring where this stuff started on X. Who are these individuals? Where was the first place that this message started and where is it going? We had able to turn on our internal monitoring tools that can tell us instead of a person visiting harmful material that's traumatizing and refreshing it over and over again, we can just tell you like, look, this thing is going viral. It's getting more hearts and likes and retweets, and it's moving to other places that you're probably not looking. Social media platforms that are more catered to a particular viewpoint, and they're not just like the general ones. But also on those platforms, it's more of an echo chamber where information about you can be used to kind of like demonize you and harm your reputation and cause dangerous action, right? So yeah, those kind of platforms. Our team was able to go in and monitor those platforms as well to give a real 360 view of where this is spreading online so the physical team can continue to look out for the possibility of it jumping to a kinetic or real world threat. Let's move on to the next slide. Now we have our legal, our investigative, and our strategic communication experts who also jumped in on this particular incident. On the legal side, you could think of like your classic Know Your Rights training as like a 100 level class. And they provided a 500 level class for our client and even invited the client's general counsel in on the conversation to talk about things that we see happening when you're facing all these kinds of threats. There was an element of this threat that involved, what you would think hopefully would be like the people who would come and save you in a situation like this. And they were almost able to give great advice on what to do in that case, as well as to Matt's point, how do we handle data retention and make sure the cybersecurity team, with the flip of a switch, is able to make sure that all emails past a certain date just disappear. They're no longer available, so they're no longer on the table. You don't have to worry about securing data that's not there. And that was a decision that was made with the client. Our investigations team were able to find the most, active of the trolls. They were able to unmask that individual. They were able to monitor and track, what became like this person's mission, which was hurting the reputation of the organization. And as this information and the incident spilled onto actual television news, our strategic comms team came in and had a tabletop exercise in the nick of time, allowing people to get trained on what to do if their door stopped by media, someone sticks a microphone in your face or a camera. And this is just an example of like how our team works together to provide all these 5 layers and 5 areas, these key points at once. Let's move on to the next one. Now, what happens when, we're not available to you because we are humans and we have to sleep and we have to eat and we have to go on vacation and all kinds of exciting things like this? Well, we service people globally at Safety Sync Group. Doesn't matter where you are in the world. We have clients all across the globe. And one thing that helps us are our artificial intelligence experts, which are agents or agentized versions of our entire team. Oftentimes people find out that I'm a hacker and they're like, oh, it's kind of like you meet a doctor at a cocktail party and then you're lifting up your shirt and saying, hey, have you seen anything like this before? Right. So there are certain questions that I get over and over and over again. And oftentimes I'm like tired. I don't want to get out of bed to answer something that to me is pretty basic. But what I realize is to the person who's asking the question is quite vital. With the agentized version of me. It's basically the top 500 frequently asked questions, but you can ask it in any language and in any particular way. And the answer is directly given to you in a secure platform. And we make that available to our clients as well. If the question involves nuance or anything revolving like um, severity that's pretty high or even medium, the AI agent bows out and says, you know what? I think you should talk to the human version of me, the human Matt, not Robo Matt. Let me schedule some time with him. In fact, he's available on Wednesday or something like along those lines. Okay, let's move on to the next one. All right, so we didn't want to take up the entire time because we want to be able to answer your questions. I'm sure that there were questions in your mind that led to you signing up and RSVPing for this webinar. So I want to thank you for joining us, and I look forward to any of your questions that you may have. Thank you, Mariah.
Thank you, Matt and Matt. Appreciate it. Folks, if you have any questions, you can throw them in the chat or you can use the Q&A. Either is fine. Okay, great first question. How can folks reach out to get a consultation?
That's my favorite question. So I will say that we offer a consultation. You can reach out to us through our email addresses, which are on our website. There's Matt H over there at safetysyncgroup.com. You can reach the whole team at team@safetysyncgroup.com. And of course, I'm Matt M, and you can find me at mattm@safetysyncgroup.com. My inbox is a little bit overflowed right now, but I'm not sure why, but it could have something to do with our current events.
Any other questions from folks?
Yeah, I'll tell you some basics about Zoom security. I'm jumping right into the chat. Sorry, Mariah. I'm doing
Oh,
your
no,
job.
perfect. Thank you.
So, Zoom as a platform became very popular during the pandemic, has a lot of built-in security because during the pandemic, a lot of the security failings were exposed. So to cover for that and to protect their stock price, they hired independent experts, like world experts in different types of security. And for free with your, well, actually, I shouldn't say for free. Well, I'll say it's like if you pay for your Zoom, which most people do, you'll have these features built in. They're not like paywalls like you'll find in most enterprise security features. The first one is you'll want to go into your Zoom as the admin and make sure that all the Zoom meetings that you create inherit these settings. So you'll do it on the like admin level, right? The first setting is you want to move from enhanced encryption to end-to-end encryption. When you make this move, you're going to lose certain things. Like you're going to lose the ability to people to call in using a regular phone line. They have to use the Zoom software. That could be Zoom on a browser. That could be Zoom installed on a desktop. It could be Zoom installed on a smartphone. But you cannot just dial in anymore. Of course, for various reasons, dialing in on landline or dialing in through a phone line is not secure to begin with. And there's no way to secure that. So they just remove it, right? When you move to end-to-end encrypted instead of enhanced encryption, you also scramble all the data. So no one ever can access your information except for you and the recipients or members of that meeting. So if this was end-to-end encrypted meeting on Zoom, you would know it because there's a green shield on every Zoom meeting. And when you click on the green shield, there's a little check in it. It tells you that this is encryption level enhanced, right? So we would upgrade that. You could just change that in your setting by flipping a switch and you'd go to end to end. You no longer can dial in, and it completely changes the way Zoom works, making it more secure, right? The two other features that we recommend for Zoom is to add a visual watermark, and a visual watermark will show whoever that person is has to log in now. They can't just show up in your Zoom meeting. They have to have a Zoom account, which is free, and log in, and then they see the name associated with that account all over the screen. So, if you have a beautiful photograph that you're trying to show or some videos, maybe that's not the feature for you. But most of the time, we're just looking at talking heads and some slides, and it's fine. Um, if a frame of the video leaks, you'll see the name of the person whose machine was compromised or the leak came from. So you can tell them, hey, you might have a virus on your machine. There might be a camera pointed at your laptop from across the street, things along those lines. Zoom, lastly, has this other feature, which is an audio watermark, which is a non-human hearable or audible sound. But if you have a leak of your Zoom meeting, you can give that audio clip to Zoom support, and they'll be able to tell whose machine that was. So imagine I'm attending this session and it's saying Matt M, Matt M, Matt M, Matt M, Matt M over and over again in this like sound that only, the humans can't hear, but is overlaid on top of the meeting. So if a clip of this meeting goes viral, the audio from it, Zoom support can now reveal that to me, but you have to turn that on. And then one bonus thing to turn on is if you're expecting people only from the country you're in, you can block everyone else from accessing your Zoom meeting. We recommend that. So only have it from, wherever you're expecting the callers to come from. This is a global call, but if we had pre-registration, we might only check the countries where we're expecting people to come from.
Thanks, Matt. Question in the Q&A here, then we'll turn back to the chat. How do we set up two-factor authentication when multiple people need to use the same login name and password?
That's a great question. You might have a communications team, maybe a social media team, and you're afraid to set up two-factor because then only one person has the code. Everyone needs to call them or text them or get the code from them. And the solution is pretty simple. What you'll do is when you do set up two-factor verification, it'll show you a QR code and you'll just say like, I cannot see the code. It's part of the standard that they'll give you a kind of serialized character string instead. And you can take that string and save that in your password manager, which I hope you're using. Please use a password manager. And now, when a new social media member of the team joins, you can give them that and they can add that to their Authenticator app. So if you want to set up two-factor, there's a website called 2FA for two-factor authentication .directory. And it has a lot of the like common tools and software you might use, even banks you might be a member of. You could type in the name and it tells you if it has two-factor, and then it shows you the docs or documents um, on how to set up two-factor. So I would recommend that. Now, if you use 1Password, is one of our favorite password managers, the two-factor setting there, you put that serial code in and you see the one-time password. It just every 30 seconds, the 6 numbers changes. You can edit and it just shows it to you the serial number again. So you can share that to other members of the team. So there are some password managers that make it really easy to do this. Big 2FA fans for on 1Password there. Thanks, Sherry.
A couple other questions here in the chat for you, Matt. You mentioned Google Workspace or Microsoft 365 could be secured. Additionally, how safe are they really in comparison to another encrypted system like CryptDrive?
Yeah, I will say like safe is a relative term. They're extremely safe. They spend millions and millions of dollars on cybersecurity, things that, the team at CryptPad and CryptDrive don't have. However, it's important to remember that while your stuff is locked down in Microsoft and in Google, you have a copy of the keys, and so do they, right? So if you were using a free Gmail address, they have the copy of the keys, and they don't need to tell you anything, including when they ever use their key, right? Only when you pay for what's called access transparency, which is available to you on the enterprise level, do they have to tell you when, why a Google staff member had to use their key to access anything, right? Now, you might be like, well, how do banks and law firms and science labs that have intellectual property and startups, how do they use these services? We don't, they might have millions of dollars of, information hidden in a Google Doc. Well, they don't let Google have one of the keys. They're the only steward of their key. And that's a new Google service that's called client-side encryption. And Microsoft offers something like it as well, which is new. Which is called Purview or Microsoft Purviews. So you would use either of those two things, and then only you have that key. Now, let's say that you were subpoenaed or warranted, or there was a legal request or law enforcement or security force request for your key. You would hear from that company, Microsoft or Google, and they'd be like, hey, we want to give the key over because we have this request. Can you please share it with us? Because we do not have it. So now, if you were to use a fully end-to-end encrypted zero knowledge service like Proton Drive or Crypt Drive or CryptPad, no one has the key but you. Your password is the key. However, those features, you have to make sure that they work because they might not have the same usability. Your team might not know how to use them the same. They might need training and education on them. And I think it's never bad to use multiple things. You can compartmentalize, you can fragment, and you can use multiple things for multiple types of documents.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Just looking at the time, probably have time for maybe two more questions here. So we'll just take them in the order in which they came in. Should we be skeptical of AI Zoom participants?
Well, don't let Kendall's note-taking otter AI hear me say this. But yeah, I mean, like when you read about how Zoom treats the AI participant, sometimes, and for other features as well, you just have to go to the privacy setting and they change it all the time. A couple things is one, you never want to share your information for training of the model. That means that all the data that it gets helps train the model. Some services will tell you that they never do that. And then the second thing is sometimes you'll have to lower your privacy and security settings to be able to use the AI. And that's something where for some meetings you might decide to do, and for other meetings you decide not to. Um, I'm less of a I have a less of an issue with the AI, as long as I understand like how it's handling my data. Is that data end-to-end encrypted as well, right? And where it stores the notes or audio or video or whatever that it's processing and how it stores it. So I would say for the most sensitive meetings, use a human. I love human beings, you know. You could do a background check on a human being. They could sign an affidavit. You know where they live. They believe in your cause. In AI, it's none of those things, but I'm not anti-AI. Next question.
Next one, in the order in which it came in, are there websites, browsers, apps, etc., we should absolutely avoid or begin moving away from?
As an expert, I'd say no, because you have a job to do and I live in the real world. I would love to tell you to join me in the hacker cave and only use this one encrypted app that's open source that I wrote with my buddy, but that's probably not going to help you with your day to day. I think that you could do anything safer. You can juggle a flaming chainsaw safer. Even people who do that have a safety checklist. It's just about understanding the risk that you're intaking. So we tend not to move people off of what they use. We just teach them how to use it safer, which might involve a lot of different steps, a lot of setting changes, and a lot of different ways to operate and behave as a human.
All right, time for one more, I think. Can you speak to any shift in cybersecurity trends or threats that we've seen with the new administration?
I try to keep it 501(c)(3) because I know there's some people on the call who are, in that. So I'm not going to talk about any particular administration in any particular part of the world. Last year we had 50% of the world having elections, so I don't even know where you're talking about. But I will say that in general, computers are very powerful, as we've learned with the onset of AI and other things, even spell check, even grammar check, even the internet itself. And they could be used for amazingly great things and for bad things as well. The intent is up to the human operator. And so human operators have been using deep fakes to manipulate faces and voices, create realistic clips of videos, even real-time calls. And I think like that's a trend. Like you might get an interview to someone who applies to a job and you're talking to them and their face is completely computer generated. That's a thing that's happening. And they're not even the person that they tell you they are. They've either paid that person for their I-9 details, like in the United States, that might be like a license or a social security number, or they might steal it just to infiltrate and get in on the first day and slowly work remotely. So those are some trends that are upsetting, but there's mitigations for that we've been seeing.
Excellent. I think we made it through the entire list. So, Maria,
We
I'll turn
did
it back
it.
over to you.
Yes, thank you, Matt Hansen and Matt Mitchell, for this very informative webinar. I know that I learned a lot. So I want to thank you both for joining us and thank you all for joining. We will be sending around the recording in a couple days if there's anything that you missed. And then we'll also send over those slides once the Safety Sync group sends those to us. So thank you all for joining and have a great rest of your day.
Stay safe, everyone, and don't be afraid of security. We got you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.